My name is Elena Brooks, and I'm 28 years old. 3 weeks ago, after we laid my grandmother to rest, my parents didn't just mourn, they plundered. They seized every savings account, every property, and every cent of her retirement, leaving me with nothing but a rotting house at 14 Maple Lane. The roof was caving in, black mold climbed the bedroom walls, and the plumbing hadn't worked since the 90s. My parents laughed about it over expensive steak dinners. My sister, Ashley, even filmed me crying and posted it to the family group chat with the caption, "Looks like the favorite child finally got what she deserved." They expected me to crumble, sell the dirt for pennies, and disappear. But a week later, the contractor I'd hired called me, his voice trembling. "Elena, we found something hidden in the wall," he whispered. "The police are already on their way. Come now." When I saw what my grandmother had tucked away behind that drywall, even I turned pale. Before I reveal the truth that destroyed my family, please take a second to like and subscribe if you believe in justice. And tell me, where in the world are you listening to this story right now? Drop your city and time in the comments. Now let me take you back to that Tuesday morning at the church, where the smell of lilies masked a scent of pure greed. The chapel at Bridgemont Community Church smelled like lilies, floor polish, and the suffocating scent of fake grief. I sat in the front pew, my eyes swollen, my hands balled into tight fists in my lap. I was staring at the mahogany casket containing the only person who had ever truly loved me, my grandmother, Eleanor. For 3 years, I had been a ghost in her house on Maple Lane. 3 years of midnight medication runs, 3 a.m. oatmeal requests, and changing wound dressings while she gripped my wrist, telling me stories about the grandfather I never met. I dropped out of nursing school at 25 to be her hands and feet. I burned through every dollar I earned at the local clinic just to keep her comfortable. I didn't do it for an inheritance. I did it because she was my heart. But as I sat there, the air felt thin. To my left, my father, Robert, stood by the guest book in a charcoal suit that cost more than my car. He was shaking hands like he was running for mayor, flashing a practiced, somber smile. My mother, Susan, dabbed her eyes with a silk tissue, just enough to look devastated for the neighbors, but never enough to smudge her designer mascara. And then there was Ashley. My sister didn't even bother to put her phone away. She was leaning against the doorframe, snapping a selfie with the casket in the background. I caught a glimpse of her screen as she typed, "Saying goodbye to Grandma. Life is so short. Grateful. Family first." The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. They had visited Eleanor once a month for 20 minutes at most, usually complaining about the old house smell. The real nightmare, however, began an hour later in Attorney Sarah Jenkins' office. It was a small brown room that felt like a trap. Robert sat in the center leather chair, the man of the house. Susan clutched her Prada purse like it was a holy relic. Ashley sat on the end, her thumbs flying across her screen, likely live tweeting the drama. I took the chair closest to the door, feeling like an outsider in my own bloodline. Attorney Jenkins opened a manila folder, her voice flat and mechanical. To Robert and Susan Brooks, the primary savings accounts totaling $480,000. To Robert and Susan Brooks, the Oak Street rental property, assessed at $310,000. To Robert and Susan Brooks, the diversified retirement funds, totaling $410,000. I stopped breathing. The math was ringing in my ears like a siren. Over $1 million in liquid assets. Everything Eleanor had spent a lifetime building was being handed to the two people who couldn't be bothered to check her pulse while she was alive. Then, the final blow. To my granddaughter, Elena Brooks, the lawyer continued, I leave the residential property at 14 Maple Lane. Current assessed value, $35,000, as is. The room tilted. $35,000. That house wasn't an asset, it was a liability. It was a tomb of rotting wood, black mold, and plumbing that hadn't functioned properly since the Clinton administration. "That can't be right," I whispered, my voice cracking. "She told me. She always said I'd be taken care of for the years I spent." Robert cut me off without even looking at me. He was busy straightening his tie in the reflection of a glass trophy. "She said a lot of things in her state, Elena. This is black and white. This is the law. It's a dump, Elena, Ashley snorted, finally looking up from her phone. But hey, at least you have a roof over your head. Well, most of a roof. I heard a familiar click shutter sound. I looked up to see Ashley's phone aimed directly at my face. My eyes were brimming with tears, my lips trembling with the sheer weight of the betrayal. 10 seconds later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from the family group chat. Ashley had sent the video of my breakdown. The caption read, "Little sis just found out she's the new queen of the haunted house. LOL. Anyone have a spare hazmat suit?" I looked at the signature page before the lawyer pulled it away. Grandma Eleanor's name was there, but the handwriting. It was a shaky, jagged scrawl that looked like a seismograph during an earthquake. That wasn't how she wrote, not when she was herself. But the folder snapped shut, and my parents stood up checking their watches. They had a celebratory dinner to get to. They left me there, sitting in a brown leather chair, holding a key to a house that was designed to break me. They thought they had won. They thought they had buried the truth along with Eleanor. But they forgot one thing. Eleanor Brooks was a woman of secrets, and she had left the biggest one behind a wall they were too arrogant to ever check. 14. Maple Lane greeted me with a puddle in the hallway and the smell of wet earth. The roof didn't just leak, it wept in 3 different places. The kitchen faucet spat out rust-colored sludge for nearly a minute before running clear. Upstairs, the bedroom where Grandma Eleanor had spent her last healthy nights was a battlefield of decay, with dark patches of mold climbing the walls like something alive. The breaker box sparked every time I tried to turn on a porch light. I spent my first night in a sleeping bag on the living room floor, listening to the house groan and settle like an old dog finding its spot. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone's calculator. The numbers were a death sentence. Part-time clinic work, $1,800 a month. Medical debt from Grandma's care, $18,000. Estimated repairs to make the house livable, $25,000 minimum. The math didn't work. Nothing worked. But then, I found the cookbook. It was tucked on the highest shelf above the stove, grease-stained and held together by a single, rotting rubber band. I opened it, expecting recipes for cornbread and peach cobbler. Instead, tucked between the pages for pot roast and potato soup, I found a small card in Eleanor's careful, elegant cursive. "Maple Lane is yours, my girl. Look closer." I read it 3 times, thinking she just meant the house itself. "Lucky me," I whispered bitterly, setting the card on the counter. But the universe had other plans. That afternoon, my neighbor across the street, Mr. Anderson, a retired postman with a heart of gold, knocked on the door holding a casserole. "Eleanor told me something once," he said, his voice grave. "She said if you ever moved in here, I should tell you to call Thomas Miller. His number is taped behind the kitchen cabinet." 1 week later, my father, Robert, called. His voice was that concerned parent tone he used when he wanted something, warm on the surface, calculating underneath. "That house is a money pit, Elena. I found a buyer. 40,000 cash. Take it, pay off your debts, and get a studio apartment. It's a clean start." Then Ashley called. No warm-up, no pretense. "Sell the house, Elena. Land values are going up because of the new corridor development. Don't be stupid and sit in that dump until you need Mom and Dad to bail you out." She hung up, but the seed was planted. If land values are going up, why did they give me this house for nothing? Unless it was a trap. Unless they wanted me to sell it back to them for pocket change so they could flip it for millions. I found the number exactly where Mr. Anderson said it would be. Thomas Miller picked up on the second ring. When he arrived the next morning, he didn't look like a contractor. He looked like an old friend. He walked through the house like a doctor examining a patient. "Roof's shot. Plumbing's a hazard," Thomas muttered, rapping his knuckles against the living room wall. "But the bones are solid. Your grandmother paid me in advance for some of this years ago. She said 15 years of friendship was worth more than an invoice." By the 3rd day of work, we were upstairs in the master bedroom. Thomas was measuring the far wall, the one facing the backyard. He tapped his knuckles against the drywall. Hollow, hollow, solid, hollow. He frowned, pulling out a laser level. Elena, this wall is 8 inches thicker than it should be. Standard interior walls are 4.5. Someone added a false layer here and they did it professionally. My heart hammered against my ribs. Look closer. Thomas didn't use a sledgehammer. He used a pry bar, easing the outer layer of drywall away. Behind it was a second layer of plywood, nailed tight and sealed with industrial caulk. This wasn't a patch job. This was a vault. When the plywood finally gave way, Thomas stepped back, his face draining of color. Inside a cavity between the studs sat a heavy, fireproof document box, gray metal, sealed in a heavy-duty plastic bag. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out and popped the latch. Inside was a navy blue notebook and a thick manila folder. I opened the folder first. It was a will. A real will. It was dated 3 months before she died, witnessed by Mr. Anderson and the local pastor, and notarized by a bank official. It left everything: the $480,000 savings, the rental properties, the retirement funds, exclusively to me. But it was the notebook that made me turn pale. It was a daily log of the last 4 years. January 15th. Susan brought papers today. She said they were for the bank. She guided my hand because I couldn't see the lines. I don't know what I signed. March 9th. Robert told me Elena is stealing my money. I know it's a lie. I saw Elena's own receipts for my medicine. Every lie, every forged signature, and every moment of coercion was documented in Grandma Eleanor's steady hand. She knew they were robbing her. She knew they were changing her will. And she hid the truth in the only place she knew they'd never look, the worthless house they intended to steal back from me. I looked at Thomas, the notebook clutched to my chest. This isn't just a family fight anymore, is it? Thomas shook his head, reaching for his phone. No, Elena. This is a crime scene. The fellowship hall at Bridgemont Community Church was a sea of white linen and expensive lilies. My father, Robert, had spared no expense for the celebration of life, for the mother he had systematically robbed. A projector hummed in the corner, cycling through photos of Eleanor. I watched the screen. Eleanor at Christmas, Eleanor at Ashley's graduation, Eleanor smiling with my parents. I wasn't in a single photo. 3 years of my life, 1,000 nights sitting by her bed, and I had been cropped out of the family history as cleanly as I'd been cropped out of the fake will. Robert stood at the mahogany podium, his voice like warm honey. My mother was the heart of this home, he told the 90 people in attendance, and I want to thank my family for standing by her until the very end. Susan dabbed her eyes, playing the grieving daughter-in-law to perfection. Ashley sat at the laptop, smugly running the slideshow. They thought they had won. They didn't know that that morning, a court order had already frozen every single one of those bank accounts. If anyone would like to share a memory, Robert announced, the floor is open. I stood up. The room went silent. I could feel my father's jaw tighten as I walked toward the front. I wasn't the broken girl they'd seen 3 weeks ago. I was wearing a simple black dress and Grandma Eleanor's gold wedding ring, the one I just bought back from Ashley's Facebook Marketplace listing for $500. I didn't bring a speech. I brought the navy blue notebook. Thank you all for being here, I began, my voice steady. My grandmother would have loved this. But there's something about Eleanor that most of you don't know. She was a writer. She kept a daily log for the last 4 years, and she asked me to share her final words with the people she trusted. I saw my mother's face go pale. Robert stepped forward, his hand reaching for the microphone. Elena, honey, this isn't the time. You're emotional. I'm not emotional, Dad, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I'm a witness. I opened the notebook and began to read. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. January 15th, I read. Susan brought papers today. She guided my hand because I couldn't see. I signed, but I don't know what I signed. A murmur rippled through the pews. I didn't stop. March 9th. Robert told me Elena is stealing my money. It's a lie. Elena buys my medicine with her own paycheck. I saw the receipts. The murmurs turned into gasps. Robert's face turned a violent shade of red. Enough, he barked, his executive mask finally cracking. That's the rambling of a woman with dementia. Sit down. No, she didn't have dementia, Robert. A voice rang out from the second row. Martha Higgins stood up, her Sunday pearls gleaming. I drove Eleanor to my house 3 months before she passed. She was sharp as a tack. She signed her real will at my dining table. Pastor Thompson and I witnessed it. Every head turned to the front row. Pastor Thompson stood slowly, his expression grave. It's true, Robert. I saw her sign it. She was fully competent. She told me she was hiding the original where only love would find it. The hall erupted. Neighbors who had known my parents for 30 years were now looking at them with pure disgust. Mr. Anderson stood up in the back. Susan, I've lived across the street for 2 decades. I saw Elena's car in that driveway every single night. I saw yours once a month, for 20 minutes. Ashley jumped up, her voice screeching. You're all taking her side because she's playing the victim. But no one was listening to her. Through the large windows of the hall, the flashing lights of 2 patrol cars pulled into the parking lot. Detective Miller and a representative from Adult Protective Services were waiting by my father's SUV. Robert tried to grab the notebook from my hand, but Thomas Miller, my contractor, stepped between us. Thomas didn't say a word, he just stood there like a wall of granite. I watched through the glass as the detectives separated my family. Ashley broke first. She always was the weakest link. Within minutes, she was pointing at our father, telling the detectives it was his idea, that she was just going along with it. The family Robert had built on a foundation of lies, fractured in a church parking lot while the whole town watched. 3 months later, the house on Maple Lane is no longer a money pit. It's a masterpiece. Thomas restored the original oak floors and the rose bushes Eleanor loved. I'm back in nursing school. My tuition paid for by the estate, the court rightfully returned to me. My parents are awaiting trial for elder financial abuse and forgery. They had to sell their own home just to pay for the lawyers. They lost everything trying to take the one thing that wasn't theirs. Last night I sat on the porch with Martha and Mr. Anderson. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the picket fence we'd just repainted. I looked down at the ring on my finger. It was warm. It's always warm. Grandma Eleanor was right. The truth always finds a wall to hide in. You just have to be brave enough to open it. The legal machinery of Ridgemont County moves slowly, but it grinds with an unstoppable weight. Within weeks of the scene at the Fellowship Hall, the probate judge issued a ruling that felt like a thunderclap. The will my father had presented was declared a fraudulent instrument, signed under extreme duress and guided hand forgery. Grandma Eleanor's real will, the one she had breathed into existence behind a wall of plywood, was upheld as the only binding truth. But justice is rarely a clean break. It's a messy, painful surgery. The court discovered that my parents, Robert and Susan, had already burned through nearly $300,000 of the estate's liquid cash in a frantic 2-month spending spree. They'd paid off the mortgage on their suburban mansion, leased a luxury SUV, and settled Ashley's spiraling credit card debts. The judge didn't care about their lifestyle. He ordered full restitution. To pay back every cent they'd stolen from Eleanor's ghost, they were forced to put their own house on the market. I'll never forget the day the for sale sign went up on their lawn. My mother called me, her voice no longer cold or commanding, but thin and breathless. Elena, please, she sobbed. We're losing everything. We're your parents. How can you let a court do this to us? I sat on my new porch at Maple Lane, looking at the rose bushes that were finally starting to bud. I didn't do this to you, Mom, I said quietly. You did this to Eleanor. I'm just making sure she finally gets to rest in peace. I hung up and blocked the number. It wasn't an act of hate. It was an act of survival. The criminal investigation was even more devastating. Robert and Susan were formally indicted on multiple felony counts of elder financial abuse and grand theft. Ashley, ever the opportunist, turned state's evidence. She traded the truth about our parents' scheme for a reduced charge of misdemeanor obstruction and 3 years of probation. She saved her own skin, just like they'd taught her to, but she lost the only thing she ever truly valued, her status. Her perfect life on social media vanished, replaced by the silent judgment of a small town that never forgets a scandal. As for 14 Maple Lane, it isn't a haunted house anymore. With the inheritance finally released, I didn't move into a penthouse or buy a sports car. I poured that money back into the bones of the home that had saved me. Thomas Miller and his crew worked through the summer. They stripped the mold, replaced the wiring, and sanded the floors until the original 1920s oak gleamed like honey under the morning sun. I'm back in nursing school now, but this time I'm not doing it on a prayer and a mountain of debt. My tuition is paid, my bills are settled, and every Tuesday and Thursday I volunteer at the same clinic where I used to scrub floors. Only now I'm the one in the white coat. The most beautiful part, though, isn't the money or the renovated kitchen. It's the community. Every Sunday, Martha Higgins walks over with a basket of warm scones. Mr. Anderson stops by to help me trim the hedges, sharing stories about how Eleanor once chased a persistent salesman off her porch with nothing but a rolling pin and a look of pure steel. I've realized that Grandma Eleanor didn't just leave me a house. She left me a fortress. She spent her final years building a network of people who would look out for me when she no longer could. She knew my parents better than I did, and she knew that the only way to protect me was to give me the tools to fight back. Last night, I went up to the master bedroom. Thomas had installed a small, elegant oak plaque on the far wall, right where the false panel used to be. It simply says, Eleanor's Truth. I sat on the edge of the bed and touched the gold ring on my finger. For the first time in 3 years, the house was perfectly quiet. No leaks, no sparks, no whispers of betrayal. Just the sound of the wind through the oak trees and the feeling of being exactly where I was meant to be. They thought they left me a ruin. They thought they could bury me in the wreckage of a broken home. But they forgot that some things are built to last, like the love of a grandmother and the power of a truth that refuses to stay hidden. The house on Maple Lane was meant to be my punishment, but Eleanor turned it into my beginning. Her story is a reminder that setting a boundary isn't an act of hate. It's an act of self-respect. Never feel guilty for protecting your peace from those who take you for granted. If Elena's journey for justice moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories of resilience. What would you have done in her shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.